Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank GREAT for organizing this symposium and for the community that is participating and following my presentation. My name is Gaudiose Mujawamariya, and on behalf of my colleagues Zena, Rory, and Tefi, I would like to share with you the results from the study which looked into the adoption of improved rice varieties in Madagascar with a gendered outlook. When we look at the many technologies that are introduced, including the rice varieties, we see that men are more likely to adopt, whereas female farmers are limitedly adopt due to several factors, including the requirement to manage land and the limited time available to them. The studies that consider gender in the process of adoption of technologies, they are limited and the results are conflicting. Here in this study, we wanted to address the necessity to identify the determinants of adoption and clarify the importance of adoption and constraining factors. And we took advantage of the mixed methods approach to identify the factors which complement the process of delivering improved technologies, and in this case, the right varieties. We conducted our study in the Central Highlands in Madagascar within two regions, Vakinankara, Trinfianaransu. In each of these locations, we sampled 4 villages and we conducted some structured interviews and focus group discussions. And in these focus group discussions, we had men and women separately. And this led us into having 16 transcripts, and also we have 164 respondents. In terms of the analysis, we had a quantitative analysis within which we made a confirmatory data analysis looking at the gender and the adoption differences. And we also used an ordered logit model to assess the determinants of adoption. This model was suitable to the context of looking at the adoption in terms of different levels. Here we considered 2 plots of rice, and then there are farmers that have adopted improved rice varieties on the 2 plots, or at least on 1 plot, or not at all. So those are the different adoption levels we have. The qualitative analysis followed the content analysis framework, and we identified the farmers' preferences and the factors which would limit or reduce adoption. Some of the results. First, we looked at the attributes of rice varieties, and then we saw that there are some attributes which are preferred both by men and men and the women, whereas for some attributes they could differ, or they differ in terms of the reasons behind such preferences. So for instance, irrespective of the area which was covered, the abiotic stress resistance was key. It could be cold in some area, whereas for the upland, it is mostly the drought. The yield is also important for them, or the weight grain. But then there are factors such as the height, which is important for the men and the women, but then on different grounds. The men prefer the high variety, the tall varieties, because of the straw for the animals, whereas for the women, it's more because of the water management. They don't want something which will be flooded. The women also are pursuing a variety that is easy to thresh because they are mostly responsible for that activity, whereas the men don't. In terms of the limiting factors, we saw that the limited access to fertilizers and seeds and some attachment to traditions are the common key limitations. The finance, labor, and time are particularly constraining for the women. When we looked at the quantitative and the qualitative analysis, as mentioned, we used a mixed method approach. We saw that they were complementary. For instance, we noticed in the table presented that the number of children make people is adopting, especially the female farmers, whereas the participation in training, association, or into the varietal selection activities boosts adoption. We also have a number of varietal attributes which were included, some having a positive, others have a negative influence. When we look at the supporting factors from the qualitative analysis, the key thing which was coming from the men, it's about the varietal attributes. For the women, and also to a good extent to the men, the access to information, knowledge, and competencies in this, building the skills are very important. Previously, we saw that finance was constraining to the women, so the access to the capital for investing into the rice production, this would support the adoption, especially for the women. In the table, I mentioned the number of children, so we see that the household objectives also comes into consideration, whether farmers are going for the food security and so on. Just an example of the many statements we had from the farmers. So the woman in Akazumiyut was saying that in the dissemination has to be done so that farmers are aware of these new improved varieties, and then a training for the farmers need to be done so that they can use the seeds in the next farming season. And then they are also asking for the fertilizers because it is really a key problem in the Central Highlands in Madagascar. There are many results coming from the study, but in the interest of time, we have just shared a few. What we observe Generally, what we observed in our study is that the yield affecting attributes such as the tilling capacity, the quality attributes such as taste are important for the farmers to make a decision towards adoption. However, the significance of each factor and the different levels, it may differ depending on the farmer's preferences uh, or the economic conditions, but also the environmental conditions. We confirmed that there are gender differences in preference. So for instance, that example for the 12 varieties, men prefer these varieties because of the straw as they are managing the livestock, whereas the women, it is for the water management, I mentioned it. There may also be a conflict of interest. Uh, Women want non-shattering varieties, but then also these varieties have to be easy to thresh. Other accompanying factors like access to fertilizers, seed systems, and finance are necessary. The question of the women's time and labor constraints needs to be resolved. This study has also shown or confirmed the importance of increasing the involvement of farmers in the research process and the exposure to new agricultural innovations. So whether it is training, whether it is sensitization campaigns, and even specifically to give them these the seeds of these new varieties so that they can try and see whether it works on their own farms. For the women, they need better access to information, knowledge, and competencies. There is necessity to strengthen their networks and groups for sharing and learning, and also to have these technologies which are complementary to facilitate the labor and time, such as the thresher. I mentioned that we use the mixed method approach, and this approach has enabled us to confirm the similar findings, such as the participation in training and so on, and that need for awareness, information, and the technical skills. The issue of finance was mentioned, and it was significant both from the quantitative and the qualitative analysis. There are attributes also. The approach has also allowed us to add meaning on findings. So for instance, for breeding, they can now understand that when the farmers want to have the medium to tall varieties, it's about straw and it's also about the water. Um, Another example is how to combine that attribute of non-shattering and also the ease to thresh. The approach has also allowed us to enhance clarity on the constraining and supporting factors. And then we understand that not all is about breeding, it is also about access to fertilizer, seed systems, the skills, and so on. So this approach is appreciated and recommended to investigate perception, decisions, and behavior. With that, I thank you everyone for listening to me, and I and my colleagues, we are ready to answer any questions. So thank you so much.